Hey, John Gilroy here. When it comes to software development, how do you focus on innovation and not on administration? Hit the music, Manny. Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast, the podcast that connects you to federal technology leaders. My name is John Gilroy, and I will be your moderator. Our guest today is Ben Chicoski, Director of Partnerships Public Sector at a company called CloudBees. And I have to tell you that we're recording this at Caboose Brewing in lovely downtown Vienna, Virginia. So what do you think of this place, Ben? A good place?
I don't think you could have picked a better one.
Nice and relaxing, right in the bike path. You can bike here, you can walk here. It's a great place to be. Let's get down to business here. We got to talk about software development here. I've been studying software development for many, many years, since you were in grade school, probably. And we'll talk about testing. Now, generally speaking, in most shops, what I've seen over the years is that we get a new guy. Let's say his name is Cleavon. He starts, and we'll put Cleavon. He'll be doing the testing because no one wants to do it. It's always at the bottom of the pile here. So things have changed now. We no longer have, people actually going into an office and doing code. It's all distributed, hybrid. So tell us about testing in the cloud and how can CloudBees help out our customers?
Yeah, no, you're spot on with that. Testing has evolved, and it's become a major part of the software delivery lifecycle. So major, in fact, that it's really contributing to the complexity and time it takes for software to move downstream, from idea to production. Unfortunately, as its role has expanded and become more important, it also has started taking more time. And there have been people describing it as the biggest time suck in the delivery pipeline, which is unfortunate because it is necessary. It is serving a critical function. And so what matters a lot when you've got so much testing happening is to make the most of it, right? We're finding that up to 80% of tests that are run end up being not necessary. And so a developer's time, we're also learning, could be spent up to 25% of that time doing testing or waiting on testing to be done. And so imagine that kind of bloat. Imagine the efficiency gains that could be made by optimizing that full test suite. And so that's where we've been focusing our energies lately and where we're going with the help of AI and machine learning.
George Orwell once wrote that all pigs are created equal. Some pigs are created more equal than others, Maybe that applies to testing. So all tests are the same. So how do you prioritize testing?
Yeah, well, we do it with the help of AI and ML. We actually just acquired an exciting new company called Launchable. The company actually is not new, but the acquisition is brand new. So newest to the CloudBees family is Launchable. This is AI-powered test automation. And so whereas most of the AI technology these days is focused on generating code, right? Producing code, which is great. That contributes to fast, productive work. That's good for the world. However, there are a couple of maybe unintended or unforeseen or unaddressed consequences of increasing speed. One is how to manage the automation and process around software releases. That's a discipline called release orchestration. That is one of my favorite topics, and I hope we get to discuss that a bit more. But the other consequence is that there's more to test. And so on the one hand, you've got AI contributing to speed, right? Increasing speed. But on the other hand, because of lack of well-orchestrated releases and more things to test, you end up having the opposite effect, where it actually decreases speed and gums up productivity.
I want to give you a quote here I got from Forrester. And this is the real world. They talk to real companies, whether it's a federal agency or a bank in Chicago. Humans are humans, how they develop software. Mm-hmm. And this is really a fascinating quote here. 48% of organizations have more than 100 tools in their toolchain for software development. Mm-hmm. And so we get poor Cleavon. He's there for 10, 15 years. He's a software developer. He's a project manager. He's got 15, 20, 100 tools? Which tools to use when? I mean, how do you know which tool to use?
Yeah. Now it's true. And, poor Cleavon is saying, my God, I was hired for one thing, but the job that I was hired for is different than the job I'm doing now. And so QA and testing is complex, getting more complex. It's a time suck, becoming a bigger time suck. And so that's why we have turned our engineering effort and focus on to the flip side of the coin, not the using AI, leveraging it to generate code faster, but using it to optimize the testing that's done. So we focused on training this AI model that examines the full test suite happening in an organization, learns from the patterns that it recognizes, learns the results, learns the impact of those code changes and the tests. And so this is test impact analysis. And so by impact, it's more than just speed. It's more than complexity. It's more than about just the results of those tests. It's about whether those tests can be trusted. Some tests are flaky. Some tests are unreliable. Right? Let's say it's a test that passes 100% of the time or fails 100% of the time. Cleavon doesn't know what to make of that. He's a very, very smart guy, well paid, but what do you do with a result like that? And so we're using this technology to A, eliminate the waste, but B, eliminate the things that are misleading, right? And so AI is learning from the testing that's happening in the organization and surfacing only what's most important so that you can reduce the nonsense, unreliable, misleading, wasteful tests that might be 75 or 80% of the tests that run. So you're only doing the ones that matter based on whatever code changes are being made.
Because the situation that many software developers are in, maybe before COVID, 5, 6, 7 years ago, they had a limited number of tools and they could test. And but what happened with COVID, they've been increased in all kinds of amount of information coming in. And there's a word that scale comes in here.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe 3 or 4 years ago, now we're not going to contact CloudBees. They've been around a while, but we're happy doing it like this. All of a sudden, you get your workload doubled, tripled. You start talking petabytes. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, the way you used to do it before COVID, you can't do it now. And you got to look around for maybe you buy another tool. Really? Mm-hmm. And can that help? I think that's why people are looking at CloudBees these days. It's because of the word scale. And, an old story back when I first got married, we had a little Honda. We had no kids. A few years later, we had 3 kids. We got a van.
You scaled up.
We didn't get a van when we first got married. Uh-huh. My wife had a Spider, a little convertible sports car. So I think that's what's happening with federal agencies is that they're getting just bombarded with an amount of information. Every day it's almost out of control.
Yeah, you're right. And in that analogy, we come from an open source heritage, right? We came into existence by way of a tool called Jenkins. Our founder invented it, created it, and it has become the global standard for doing continuous integration. Now, that's the Mazda Miata, right? It works perfectly.
Right.
You and your wife.
That's it. Yeah, great.
Are just cruising around Vienna.
Yeah.
Right? Or maybe you should be biking. When you go to Caboose, you either bike or walk. But if you're, going shopping or just going for a Sunday drive, you're in the Miata. But when you scale up with those 3 kids, all of a sudden the Miata isn't cutting the mustard. And so you gotta adapt. Same is true for software development. What works at small scale does not necessarily work at large scale. So you run into very common scaling challenges that only an enterprise grade solution can address.
The software developers who are listening have heard about Jenkins. Some people don't. Jenkins has been around for 15 years. Mm-hmm. It's open source. It's been beat up and knocked around every which way but loose. And it's a very tried and tested form of managing, reducing errors, automating and scaling software. So it's kind of like a Honda motor. Yeah, that's the 5.0 liter motor. That's been around. They made a million of those. That's real solid. And so that's what Jenkins is. Jenkins is the motor. Yeah. Keeping with his car analogy.
That's right. But whereas it's good for small scale, when you scale up, it runs into a couple of common challenges, right? One is around overloading it. You've got a bunch of different development teams all accessing one Jenkins server. That presents a risk. It presents bottleneck. Right? And the other is kind of Wild West Jenkins, ungoverned, distributed Jenkins, where you've got all these little Jenkins running around the country or operating, each is a different development
They call
team.
them Jenkins Islands. The Jenkins Islands problem.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. But let's say you're in the shared services org, or you're vice president of application development, or CIO. Right? You really run into problems understanding what's happening within all those different little Jenkins teams. And so how are you going to apply governance or standards or proper guardrails if A, you don't even have the visibility into what's happening across that distributed development enterprise, or B, the ability technically to enforce those things?
I was reading an article in Federal News Network about your company, and the gentleman writing used the word wrangle. I kind of like hey, we're doing from cars to horses. You got to wrangle that software. You got to corral it. You have to funnel it so it's productive and efficient. And so Jenkins has done this for many years. CloudBees bigger and better, and puts that motor in a van, let's say. And what Launchable does, it says, well, we got this great start. Now we're going to take and once it's there to be tested, we can accelerate that. So it accelerates that on both ends.
No, you're absolutely right. And it's part and parcel with the whole DevSecOps use case. And to me, DevSecOps is quite simply a safe and professional way of making changes. That's not my definition. It's one I've adopted, but I love it. And so part of that is ensuring that you have trust and confidence in how things have been developed and then delivered. Right? I love this concept of a trustworthy pipeline. Worthy and trustworthy. I think that's a really good encapsulation of what your end goal should be, because, well, there's a lot of reasons. But what we're finding, the best organizations are the ones that have implemented rigor and discipline across previously disconnected development enterprise, right? By first gaining the insights, visibility into everything that's happening. And this is what leads back to this concept of release orchestration that I mentioned before.
And I'm just thinking that if I went to shop and there were 100 different tools being used, how would you get them all to orchestrate? I mean, it would be almost impossible, because one team may be, we're good with this one, another team good with that one, and you could be bad together, good together. You just don't know.
That's true. That's true. Step number one, you go with a technology that has more integrations, a larger ecosystem of plugins than anything else out there. Fortunately, we are the beneficiaries and contributors to a Jenkins-based technology that fits that profile to a T. It's over 2,000 integrations. So it doesn't really matter what tools a customer, an agency has invested in or will invest in.
It brings them in the umbrella, kind of like that's what it is. Yeah.
It's the orchestrator, right? The SDLC has a bunch of different steps. Any number of tools can perform each of those steps, but we bring the orchestration that ties them all together into harmonious, trustworthy pipelines.
A couple years ago, I stumbled on an acronym called SBOM, Software Bill of Materials. And at the time, it's like, well, finally, if you're going to grab code, we have a little certification here. This code's going to be great. And I can put my feet up and have a cigar. It's great. Mm-hmm. Well, looky here. You use the word change. Changes. How about continuous improvement, continuous delivery, continuous monitoring? And so that SBOM thing, you throw it out the window, or should you include it in the window? Where do these concept of a software bill of materials fit within your company?
Well, change is an important word. We should be embracing change, right? If you don't embrace change, you stagnate, and there's nothing modern about that. If you're going through a digital transformation, like you name the agency, then you have to be embracing change. But you have to do it in a disciplined, safe, professional manner. And so being able to have the confidence and trust in putting capabilities into the wild, into production, right? Allowing software to move downstream, you have to have the evidence that something has been built the right way. It is composed of the right things. It has been tested properly. there's all these different questions that need to be addressed. You can't answer those questions without visibility. And so where this release orchestration technology comes into play is by tying into all the tools in that chain, right? Far left, all the way through far right, and capturing the input and output of each so that you can build this mountain of evidence for whoever needs it, whether that's an auditor or an IT manager, somebody in shared services. In Fed, there's the authorizing official, the AO, who puts the stamp of approval on the ATO, right? A common pain point across 100% of agencies, right? Having this mountain of evidence will empower the decisions about whether something is trustworthy. SBOM is just one of those. It's one assemblage of a bunch of evidence. And so we can orchestrate the assembly of that package of evidence.
I was just thinking about these 100 tools again. And I've got 100 tools in my garage, different sizes. I don't know all if they're certified to anything, but the ATO is going to make sure that each one of those tools complies. And even if they do all comply, that's 100 steps that you could eliminate with having something with a more umbrella.
Yeah, no, that's true. And there's, I think, a great way to look at this. Again, I'm stealing this from somebody else. People should go check out minimumcd.org if they're interested in this concept, because they do a really good job of capturing this. But one of the hallmarks of the philosophy is to define what deployable means. Define deployable, and then automate the heck out of that. But what defining deployable catalyzes is not only the interaction between dev and sec and ops, but the output, which is kind of a statement of what it means to be allowed to be in production. Right? What does it mean for us to approve? What does this software have to go through and demonstrate to us to make us confident that it can be released? So step one, I would say, is define deployable in your organization and then automate what you can out of that.
Looking 5 years down the road, I look at the Washington Nationals. I'm pretty happy what's going to happen in the next 5 years. But what about software development life cycle in the federal government? Where do you see the big challenges are going to be? Executive orders are nice. There's policy, then there's implementation. So where do you see it all heading in the next 5 years?
The way you've started this conversation to focus on testing and kind of what has emerged in the course of conversation, release orchestration, are two of the main areas that are going to need to be addressed, which is both a challenge and a huge opportunity, not just for the government agencies that are going to benefit from it, but for the ecosystem of contractors. Right? These systems integrators have an immense opportunity in front of them. And we have a very, very tight and important relationship with them. Our go-to-market model is 100% focused on our integrator friends. And so I say that because release orchestration is either done DIY or kind of limped through or neglected entirely.
Yeah.
And so that presents this opportunity for integrators to step in and establish themselves as leaders in that space, saying, we have really well-established expertise in continuous delivery and release orchestration to make sure that you, customer, can have confidence in the software that you and your people are producing.
And you have to remember the word scale is going to be thrown in here, because what is going to happen? 5 years ago, we couldn't predict the amount of software we have now. And 5 years from now, it could be just crazy. I mean, if you look up in the sky, there's 5,000 satellites now. There's going to be 30,000 in the next 5 years. Talk about being deluged with information. How do you scale that?
Right. Yeah. With scale comes complexity a lot of times.
It does, yeah.
Exactly right. But you gotta be able to, and you can't handle all that just by throwing more people at the problem, can you? No, you gotta have technology that kind of enforces standards, kind of builds rigor and discipline to the automation around your processes from the very start.
Well, great. This has been a real fun interview here. You have been listening to the Federal Tech Podcast with John Gilroy. I'd like to thank my guest, Ben Chicoski, Director of Partnerships Public Sector at CloudBees.